Last month, the Texas Supreme Court temporarily blocked the execution of Robert Robertson, but now the justices say state lawmakers exceeded their authority with their legal moves that led to the delay. He is on death row for the murder of his 2-year-old daughter. His attorneys say his conviction was based on discredited science and he deserves a new trial. One day before his scheduled execution, the Texas House Committee on Criminal Jurisprudence issued a subpoena for him to testify at the Capitol. That legal maneuver eventually blocked the execution. Ryan Chandler has been following this story. What does this mean for him, and is his execution actually going to go forward?
Well, it very well could. The person who will ultimately decide whether they will try to execute Robertson again is the Anderson County District Attorney, which is where his conviction was originally won. But it's much more complicated than that. What the Supreme Court said had nothing to do with the fundamental questions of guilt or innocence or whether Robertson should be executed or not. They were tasked with deciding whether the legislature's subpoena to have him testify was valid, because that really sparked almost a constitutional crisis in Texas with the executive and the legislature competing over the separation of powers. The Supreme Court ultimately said no. The legislature stepped out of line when they called him to testify. Just because it was so close to his execution date, that move ultimately delayed his execution. But they also said if they want to compel him to testify in the future, they still can, and they still intend to.
Well, lawmakers on the committee do believe that he deserves a new trial. Does the court's opinion end that effort?
No, it does not. The court that will ultimately decide whether Robertson gets another day in court is the other high court, the Court of Criminal Appeals. I just talked to Robertson's attorney, and she has been trying to get the court to accept that there is new evidence that deserves a new hearing. So far, the court has declined to do that. But in January, the composition of the CCA is going to look a lot different. There's 3 new judges coming in. So they hold out hope that perhaps there could be a new trial. But there's no indication that that's going to happen yet.
And just to understand this a little bit better, the Court of Criminal Appeals handles death penalty appeals. Right. So how did this case actually end up before the Texas Supreme Court? Yeah,
it's a really good question, because at the heart of this issue is a criminal case and an execution. Typically, those matters would not be decided by the highest civil court, but the Court of Criminal Appeals. However, the question in front of the Supreme Court this week had nothing to do with guilt or innocence. It was simply about whether the legislature acted appropriately. This was a sheer civil question.
All right, we'll be following it closely. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks.
I just said no way. It's not going to happen. I'm going to do what I can to try and learn all I can, what rights we have.
As the population in Texas booms, public entities are turning to private land to keep up with growth. What you need to know if they come for your home using eminent domain, and why state lawmakers are taking a closer look at the law after our investigation, coming up.